In this part, I want to talk about the connective tissue. The connective tissue is the most diverse, abundant, and widely distributed tissue in our body. Connective tissue have different functions like support, protection, and binding the organs. Examples of connective tissue include tendon, the structure which can attach muscle to bone, ligament, the structure which can attach bone to bone, adipose connective tissue or fat, cartilage, bone, blood, and lymph. All connective tissue share a common origin. They are all derived from the embryonic connective tissue, which we call it mesenchyma. In addition, while almost all connective tissue is vascular, the different types of connective tissue exhibit a range of vascularity, from very vascular, like areolar connective tissue, to poorly vascular, dense regular connective tissue, and avascular in mature cartilages. And in this part, I want to talk about this connective tissue and the diversity of connective tissue which we have in our body. But before I start talking about connective tissue, you need to know that all connective tissue share three basic components. In all connective tissue, we have cells. This is cell, different types of cells as you see here. We have protein fibers like elastic fibers and collagen fibers, and also we have the other fibers which we call it reticular, and we don't have it in this picture. And we have a ground substance, the gel-like material which is located between cells and fibers. So all the connective tissues has these three components: cell, protein fibers, and ground substance. Together, the ground substance and the protein fibers are called extracellular matrix. In this picture, you can see the epithelial tissue here and the connective tissue in this part. And we have basement membrane or basal lamina which separate these tissues from each other. What are the differences between epithelial tissue and connective tissue here? If you pay attention, first you see that in the epithelial tissue, all of your cells are same. But in connective tissue, you have different types of cells. In epithelial tissue, your cells are connected together by cell junction, and we don't have extracellular matrix between them. But in connective tissue, our cells are scattered, they are not attached together, and they don't have any intercellular junction. In epithelial tissue, we don't have any blood vessel. But our connective tissue, most of them are vascular. And this is a capillary or a blood vessel we can see in this picture. So these are the differences which we have between epithelial tissue and connective tissue. These are the properties of connective tissue. They are diverse and abundant. The cells usually occupy less space than matrix, and I told you that the matrix are protein fibers and ground substance. Cells are usually not in direct contact with each other, and we don't have intercellular junction. Highly variable vascularity. They have different types of vascularity. Some of them, like loose connective tissue, have many blood vessels, and some of them, like cartilage, don't have any blood vessel. And between them, we have tendons and ligaments with few blood vessels. In this picture, you can see the locations of connective tissue. You can see first the connective tissue, like loose connective tissue, which can bind the organs together. You can see fibrous connective tissue, which can do support. You have you have blood, which can do transport. You have bone, which can help you to move. We have a bone also as the storage of adipose tissue and fat, and also calcium ion. You have cartilage, which can do physical protection, and also it can make support to organs. You have adipose tissue, which can generate heat. We have blood and lymph, which can do immunity. So they have different functions in our body, and you can see the classification of connective tissue in this slide. In this slide, you have uh, all types of connective tissue. First, all of them come from one origin, and their origin is mesenchyme. Mesenchyme is one layer in the body of embryo. And this connective tissue is divided into three different types. First, we have connective tissue proper or proper connective tissue. We have supporting connective tissue and fluid connective tissue. The fluid connective tissue is blood and lymph, and I will talk about them later in this chapter for you. The blood is circulated in the blood vessel, and the lymph is in our lymphatic vessels. The lymph is actually the extracellular fluid at the capillary network. When our capillaries want to send their oxygen and nutrient to our cell and take their carbon dioxide and waste product, some parts of the fluid remain between the cells. And this is the characteristic of the lymphatic system, to collect this lymph and bring it back to our bloodstream. The other type of connective tissue is supporting connective tissue. And our supporting connective tissue is divided into cartilage. The cartilage, the skeleton which you have in the tip of your nose, or the skeleton and the framework of your ear, is the cartilage. They are semi-solid supporting connective tissue, and that we can divide the cartilages in hyaline, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. I will talk about these cartilages completely in the cartilage chapter. Then we have bone, which has solid matrix, and this bone is divided into two parts. We have compact bone and spongy bone. And also we have the other type of connective tissue, which is proper connective tissue, and our proper connective tissue is divided to loose and dense connective tissue. The loose connective tissue contains fewer fibers and more ground substance, and the dense connective tissue contains more fibers and less ground substance. The areolar connective tissue, or loose connective tissue, is divided to areolar, adipose, and reticular. And the dense connective tissue is divided to dense regular, dense irregular, and elastic tissue. Now, I want to talk about these different tissues for you in this chapter and in the next chapters in A&P 1. I will talk, or your instructor will talk about blood and lymph in A&P 2 for you. In this picture, you can see the general structure of connective tissues. I told you that we have diverse and different types of cells, as you see in this picture. Some of them are elongated, some of them are round, some of them, like macrophages, has pseudopodia and they don't have any specific shape. You can see fibers, collagen fibers, and elastic fibers. You have ground substance between them, and you have blood vessels. Your cells are not connected together. Here you have the list of the cells in your connective tissue. The first cell is called fibroblast. In this picture, you can see the fibroblast. These are the fibroblasts, these elongated cells. They are relatively flat cells with tapered end, and are the most abundant resident cell which we have in our connective tissue proper. They produce the fibers and ground substance of our extracellular matrix. The next type of cell is called macrophages, And in this picture, you can see the macrophages here. The macrophages are relatively large, irregular cells that are derived from a type of white blood cells, which we call them monocyte. So we have a monocyte in our blood vessels, in our blood. The monocyte come out of our blood, come to connective tissue, and change to macrophage. The name of macrophages in different organs of our body are different. In connective tissue, we call it macrophage. In our bone, we call it osteoclast. In our brain, we call it microgliocyte. In our liver, we call it Kupffer cell. In our skin, we call it dendritic cell or Langerhans cell. In our lung, we call it dust cell. So the macrophages have different names in different parts of our body, but all of them can do phagocytosis. They can engulf damaged cells and pathogen and destroy them. These cells can move toward the pathogens, because from the pathogens we have some release of some chemicals which can attract the macrophages and immune cells to fight against them. And we have adipocytes in our connective tissue. Here you can see the adipocytes or fat cells. The adipocytes appear in small clusters within some type of connective tissue proper. If we have large clusters, they can make their own connective tissue, which we call it adipose connective tissue. Their function is a storage of energy for us, a storage of triglycerides and fat molecules, which we can use them for making energy. And the other type of cell is called mast cell. And in this picture, you can see the mast cell here. This is the mast cell, and the mast cell are the cells which are a small mobile cell, and they are usually found near the blood vessels. They secrete heparin to inhibit blood clotting, and also they can secrete histamine to dilate blood vessels and make inflammatory response and inflammation. The mast cells are not the resident of our connective tissue all the times. They are wandering cells. When we need them, they come to connective tissue. When we don't need them, they move from our connective tissue. So these are the cells which we have, the most important cells which we have in our connective tissue. The other cell is mesenchymal cell, and this is the mesenchymal cell. The mesenchymal cell is the stem cell in the connective tissue, and if we have a damage in connective tissue, this cell starts to division and produce the other cells like fibroblast. I want to talk about fibroblast a little bit. From now, you can hear some suffix for your cells. Fibroblast and fibrocyte. In the bone, you have osteoblast and osteocyte. In the cartilage, you have chondroblast and chondrocyte. What is the meaning of blast here, and what is the meaning of cyte here? The blast means immature and producing cell. They are the young cells which we have in our connective tissue, in the bone, in the cartilage, or in the other parts of our body. As you see in this picture, the blast cell is large. The nucleus contains euchromatin more than heterochromatin. So it means that our cell is very active for protein synthesis. As you see here, we have many organelles in the cell, and these organelles can make proteins, can package these proteins, can make carbohydrates and lipids and secrete them. So they are producing, they are young. When they become old, we call them cyte. they become mature and non-producing. But they have this capacity to become producing again. So the site means mature and non-producing. As you see in this picture, the fibrocyte is smaller than fibroblast. The nucleus contain more heterochromatin than euchromatin. It means that this cell is not active. We have few organelles, and the organelles which we have in the cell is only enough for the needs of the cell. The cell is like retired cell. The cell is the resident of our connective tissue, but it cannot produce anything. And we have different fibers in our connective tissue. The first fiber is called collagen fiber. The collagen fibers are unbranched, cable-like long protein fibers. They are very strong and flexible and resistant to stretching. These fibers are stronger than steel of the same diameter. Collagen comprises about 25% of our body protein, and the fiber appear white in fresh tissue. So the other name of collagen fiber is white fiber. In tissue sections stained with hematoxylin and eosin, which is the routine staining of our histology slides, they appear pink. Collagen fibers are numerous in structures like tendons and ligaments. The other fiber is called reticular fibers. First, I made a mistake in typing. So here we should have reticular. And here we should have elastic. Please correct it in your own PowerPoint. Here, first about the reticular fibers. The reticular fibers are similar to collagen fibers. Actually, they are a type of collagen fibers. They are much thinner. They contain the same protein subunit, and these fibers can form branching interwoven framework, which are tough, but they are not flexible. Reticular fibers are very important for the framework of the organs like lymph node, spleen, and liver. And finally, we have elastic fibers. The elastic fibers are thinner than collagen fibers. They are branched, they appear in wavy shape. Elastic fibers can do stretching and recoiling easily. The fresh elastic fibers has a yellowish color, so we call them yellow fibers. These fibers are visible in the tissue sections, which we stain them with a specific staining. And most of the times they appear in black color. Elastic fibers are abundant in skin, arteries, and lungs to allow them to return to their normal shape after being stretched. So these are the fibers which we have in our connective tissues. And for the proper connective tissue, we have two important subunits. One of them is called loose connective tissue, and the other one is dense connective tissue. In loose connective tissue, we have more ground substance than cells and fibers. And in dense connective tissue, we have more fibers than cell and ground substance. So in the loose connective tissue, the ground substance is more than the other parts, and in dense connective tissue, the fibers are the important things. The subdivisions of loose connective tissue are areolar, reticular, and adipose. And our dense connective tissue is divided to dense regular and dense irregular connective tissue which vary in the orientation of the fibers. And now I want to talk about the loose connective tissue for you. The loose connective tissue contains relatively fewer cells and protein fibers than dense connective tissue. The protein fibers are sparse and irregularly arranged, and there are abundant viscous ground substance between cells and fibers. Loose connective tissue acts as the body's packing material by supporting and surrounding structures and organs. Loose connective tissue are well vascularized, and the first one is areolar connective tissue. In this picture, you can see the areolar connective tissue. They are unconfined organization of collagen and elastic fibers. As you see in this picture, we don't have any specific organization for elastic fibers and collagen fibers. These thick branches are collagen, the thin ones are thick. They contain many blood vessels, and they have fixed and wandering cells of connective tissue like fibroblasts, macrophages, adipocyte, mast cells, mesenchymal cells. The ground substance is abundant and viscous. Areolar connective tissue is present nearly everywhere in our body. It's found in the skin, in the major component of subcutaneous layer, and it can bind the skin and some epithelia to deeper tissues. It can also protect and surround organs, some individual nerve fibers, muscle cells, and blood vessels. So this connective tissue can wrap our organs most of the times. They have many blood vessels and they can nourish the epithelium for us, and it's located beneath the epithelium. You see that we have very unorganized fibers. The cells are scattered between them, and you can see ground substance as you see here in this picture. The other type of loose connective tissue is called reticular connective tissue. The reticular connective tissue houses abundant leukocytes and some fibroblasts within a meshwork of reticular fibers. The leukocyte is the other name of our white blood cells, as you see in this picture. And this tissue can form the stroma, the structural framework of many lymphatic organs like a spleen, lymph node, red bone marrow, also our liver and kidney. In this picture, you can see these black fibers, which are interwoven, and they make a network, and the leukocytes are scattered between them. And the next connective tissue is called adipose tissue. The adipose tissue or fat tissue is a highly vascularized loose connective tissue, and we have many adipocytes here. Adipocytes are filled with lipid droplets. Look at here. This is a lipid droplet which we have in adipocyte. This lipid droplet, if I want to draw it for you, imagine that this is your cell. Inside your cell, you have a large lipid droplet, and this lipid can push the nucleus of our cell in one side. So this blue part is the nucleus, the yellow part is the adipose or fat or lipid which we have inside the cell, and the red part is the cell membrane. So you see that we have a very few cytoplasm around this fat droplet. On the histology slide, the lipid is extracted during tissue processing. So you can see this empty looking in our adipocyte. There are two types of adipose connective tissue. One type is white, which we have it in human, and one type is called brown adipose tissue. We have brown adipose tissue in hibernating animals, and also we have it in newborn. And this brown connective tissue is very important for reservation of energy during hibernation and also for our newborn. The adipose connective tissue can do insulation and cushioning for us as well as energy storage, and we have them in subcutaneous or under skin, and also it can pack our organs. And the other connective tissue is called dense connective tissue. And we have two types of dense connective tissue. One type is dense regular, and one type is called dense irregular. The dense connective tissue is formed of protein fibers, and it contains less ground substance than loose connective tissue. We know it as collagenous tissue too, because we have mostly collagen fibers here. Based on the orientation of the fibers, you can see regular connective tissue or irregular connective tissue. In the regular connective tissue, we have densely packed parallel collagen fibers. All of your collagen fibers have a very good organization and parallel to each other. And between the fibers, you can see the fibroblasts which are compressed, the tendons which can attach muscle to bone, and the ligament which can attach bone to bone are a kind of this connective tissue. And the other one is the dense irregular connective tissue. The dense irregular connective tissue contains bundles and lumps of collagen fibers that extend in different directions, with an extensive blood supply between the collagen fibers. This tissue can provide support and resistance to a stretch in multiple directions. Dense irregular connective tissue is formed in most of the dermis of the skin, the epimysium, which is the connective tissue around the skeletal muscle, the epineurium, which is the connective tissue around the nerve, the periosteum, which is the connective tissue around the bone, the pericardium, which is the connective tissue around the cartilage. It also forms the capsule of the organs, the capsule of liver, kidney, spleen, or the other organs in our body. And as you see again in this picture, the collagen fibers are these pink fibers. They are arranged in different layers. And as you see here, the amount of fibers is more than cells and matrix. We call it dense, irregular connective tissue. In the next video, I will talk about the other type of connective tissues, supporting connective tissue, and also fluid connective tissue a little bit for you.